Da 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 da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Give me a couple of minutes. I need to get into my console here um, and see what's going on. I attached my Windows account to my YouTube cameras and stuff, and I've kind of made a mess of it. So I just want to make sure that we are live right now. And just give me 1 second. I don't mean to be so disorganized here, but it took me by surprise. Okay, I'm live. I don't know if there's a picture going on though. You guys, if you could let me know in the comments, if you pop into my live, let me know if you can see me at all. Oh my goodness. Let me just switch this out. Give me a second. I am here, you guys. It is a podcast. I suppose I could. Yeah, but it is frustrating sometimes when you work with YouTube for so long and then you find that there are issues. And tonight I can see that we have issues. There is sound. I'm glad for that. So if you don't mind hanging out with me for a few minutes, it is a podcast. So, you don't need to see me. I am a sweaty mess to start with. And you know what? We'll figure it out. We'll sort it out tomorrow. And hopefully, we won't have this same issue. Okay, let's start over. Da 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 da. What's my good chair? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out. Let people know I've gone live. They're only going to see a black screen tonight. But I think for tonight that would be okay because it's how we fly in the issues. You know what I mean? Lots of times people will like freak out, which I did a little bit to be honest. I did try to set it up a few times the way that I wanted to. It just wouldn't work out. I kind of know what the issue is. My own fault in that. These connections in this digital age, in getting those wires crossed with my Google account and my Microsoft account. And that seems to be the issue. And it's kind of put me in a state now because in this moment, all I really want to do is get into my settings and sort it out. But it is in those mistakes, it is in the failures that we have that we can learn to overcome. And actually, not just to learn to overcome, but to learn to overcome in a calm, slow, meticulous kind of idea of making sure that we're going to get through whatever rough spot we have in the moment with the least amount of mess up. Is that what I'm going to say in there? That's what I'm going to say in there. Okay, because I am discombobulated, whatever that word is, how you pronounce that word, we're just going to pick a word tonight. So I've got my deck of cards here, my 54 powerful words, and that's all they are. They're powerful words. We're just going to pick a card here and we're just going to go into the topic for a few minutes. First perspective, first thing that comes to my mind, and we'll just do a couple of minutes tonight so that I don't know if I'll do it tonight. I may do it tomorrow when I get up, but oh my goodness. The word we got tonight was choices. Uh, wow, isn't that great? Because I could have chosen not to come live because oh my goodness, I messed my settings up again. And I could make that choice not to show up, or I could choose to see if I can fly with this. I could choose to see if I could overcome what I think in the moment is an obstacle, but with a few cursor moves and a few buttons that it could be resolved. Now, I don't want to resolve it through my live show, but it is in our choices. Okay, so what did I write here for choices? Choices without action will not bring about change. And it is our choices that bring about change. If we had our way, we would want the couch and the remote control. We would want to be left alone. No news is good news, right? We like that stable, non-issue aspect of our lives, right? It's funny with me. I'm that person that has been around change all my life. Most of the time, at least when I was a small child, preteen, teenager, young adult, I didn't get much say, or at least I didn't think I had choices, right? So I always followed suit with whoever the authority was in the moment, whether that was my father, my mother, my teachers. It could even be my sisters, my friends. It could be any kind of authority figure in my mind to think that they were better than me, that they were one step ahead of me, right? That they knew more than I knew, that I would relinquish, right? Any ideas that I had any choice. I have to be honest, when it came to choices, this is something fairly new for me to be dipping into, right? For the most part, I thought if I made a choice, it was going to be a bad choice. So, for a lot of the time in those codependent relationships that I had, I would allow whoever I was interacting with at that time to make that call. And then I would just fly with it, right? I would just move within somebody else's choice and not necessarily my choice. It wouldn't have probably been something I wanted to do, right? In that people pleasing, we're always doing something somebody else wants to do. We're always believing and moving in directions that other people have made those choices, right? We're talented. We can create within other people's choices. But what about our choices? What about the things that we want for our lives, those things that we believe that somebody else might not believe because we've never moved in that direction because they're choosing something else. But what if we made those choices for ourselves? When I first woke up to some of these ideas, I found myself quite alone in those ideas. I had no choice. I had to make the choices for myself. I was waking up to some ideas, and one of those ideas was that I was very codependent, that I had relinquished any responsibility, accountability, and probably that sense of what I had to contribute, and just put that off to the side and just followed suit, like I said, with whoever I was working with in the moment. And I would never put up a fight in that. I always gave in. Sometimes I gave in because somebody I thought had a great idea, and because I could work within that idea, that I could create something fun, right? That I could plan a camping trip or plan a trip anywheres, or I could create within my own family, that I could set boundaries. Now, there's a big one. I didn't even know what boundaries were. up until maybe 6 years ago. And believe me, since then, I have been putting them in place. Why? Because I could see that my life moved better, that my life felt better. And those were just the beginning of some of the choices that I have been able to put in place in recent years. And it is the evidence, right? Because when I can experience and when I can see within my own eyes and within my own life that these boundaries work, these boundaries allow me to make some choices and to be able to move within those choices, even if somebody else didn't think they were good choices. Even if somebody else was kind of pushing me or bullying me, right? And that is so prevalent in this world with me growing up. I moved in directions through some of those aspects. And, it was a big part of that depression in myself, that I've never been truly a depressed person. I don't know why. Maybe it was in that little bit of balance of being in the extremes of the parentage of two different personalities, two different beliefs, two different ends of the spectrum, that I never found that I really had to take on that role. Maybe in the moment I had to follow it because that person was the authority, right? And so I would have no choice and I would have to move that way. But if I didn't feel they had that authority, I would practice in making choices. And it's just not making the choices, but it's moving and creating like I did for other people growing up. In even as an adult, in my friendships and in my relationships within my own family, that I would be the support system. I was that support system for my sister. She was the matriarch of the family. She was so willing to take that role that I didn't want. Why? Again, because of that couch remote control. No news is good news. Not to cause waves, not to rock the boat. And these are lessons I learned very early in my life. And because I learned those lessons, because I absorbed those lessons, they weren't my choices, somebody else's choices, but still, right? I didn't relent in that. I accepted that. And in that, this is where I found that I did the most detrimental harm to myself. It's very important for us to practice to make choices, right? If you could make a big choice, right? Even better, make that big choice if you know it's the right choice for yourself. But I am a big believer in baby steps because I needed to do this in baby steps because it was scary. It was difficult, right? And I had to find ways that I could manage to get this bit of movement done for myself without without making myself feel like I was a total loser. I'm putting that big L on my forehead there, right? That I was a big loser in that. It took some time. It took years, in all honesty, and it will probably take more years moving forward as I dip my feet into more important and pertinent lessons in my life that I might have to do a little bit of security check, that I might have to expand in those boundaries, And then maybe even reflect on some of those boundaries because I've built up that strength. I've built up that belief in myself and I've built up that resilience that some of those boundaries just might not be as necessary now as they were at one time. And then, right, that's a good thing too, because that allows that boundary was keeping something away, right? But if you can allow that boundary to dissipate and see what comes towards you, and you look at that and go, oh my goodness, that's so and so and so and so. And that person did the most horrible things to me. And I said I would never, ever allow that person to come within 10 feet of me ever again. But in the lessons, we learn sometimes that we push things that are necessary in our own lives away from us because they're scary. They're difficult. They're frightening. They're they're narcissists, right? And we had those boundaries in place for a reason. But how do we move forward unless we can resolve some of the difficulties? We just can't keep pushing what we don't like away from us because we are supposed to amalgamate. We are supposed to assimilate, right? It is in that synthesis of everything. I get my lessons from all different kinds of sources. Even today, well, today, this week, I was kind of a little bit resilient in some of the new content that was coming towards me because I work very physically. I want to see, I want to talk, I want to feel out the the creator in front of me that's giving me those lessons. It's how I learn. It's my hypervigilance. It's how I feel out the truth. It's how I can be more accurate in the percentage of how much I'm getting as the truth. There is so much untruth out there. There is so much AI generated content out there. It's really hard to feel out without seeing the creator, without, right? Especially with some of these pop up channels, these channels that, within a week or so, they've got like go from zero to like 100,000 subscribers. And, it makes me nervous. But at the same time, there's something in that content, something that I'm recognizing, something that I'm feeling out a little bit differently than the way I used to feel things out. This week, I've been taking in content without seeing the actual creator. I've actually been taking content from one of these pop up channels. I would never have thought that I would ever have done that. But you sit in and you feel out, not the content creator, but you feel out the message. So when we talk about choices, I had to make a choice in that because to me the message resonated, the message hit me, but I have no idea who this creator is who's making this content. I have no idea where they picked it up. I have no idea who their mentors are, who they learned it from, right? Who their teachers are, what their beliefs are, whether they're light or dark, or they're light in their darknesses, or their darknesses touching the light for the very first time. I have no idea. But I made a choice. I made a choice, I think, on a couple of channels, and I'm just going to feel them out. I'm going to be very careful in what I resonate with, right? Because again, in that hypervigilance, and I'm right, I guess it's in that idea that I'm supposed to start letting go of that hypervigilance. Maybe that's the lesson in that, right? But I'm not going to read in too much because I do things in baby steps. So, in those baby steps, right, I'm going to take that content in a little bit and I'm going to feel into the content rather than feeling into the creator. And that's a choice that I make. Choices without action will not bring about change. That was a little action that I took. If I hadn't made that move, I might have missed out on some really amazing movement, not just for myself, but I'm going to say my brand because my brand is my message, right? So in my brand, I'm making some choices that are unfamiliar to me. And so in my digestion, right, I'm going to do it slowly. I'm not going to present the content, right, to my audience until a perception, right, because this is, I'm feeling it out, I'm learning, right, I am resonating with it, but it's not yet a perspective because a perspective is a belief. And that content creator, whoever they are, right, is going to have to prove themselves just like any other creator that, that I follow, that I trust, because I've been with them for so long that I have been able to build up that relationship. So what makes me nervous is these are pop-up channels. I'm calling them pop-up channels because they weren't even in existence 2 or 3 months ago. And yet their followers are just like, it's like viral, like going viral. And content only moves like that if somebody is either buying advertising for their brand, which is a great possibility, right? Hitting the marks. I feel the targeting in some of those marks, right? Or really there is a truth that needs to be absorbed. So I'm making the choice to continue. It's not the only content. I'm not just sticking with this, but I am feeling this out and I'm going to allow it to penetrate, I guess, a little bit of some of my understandings because I have to be willing to change. And that's the biggest message here I could give anybody because you can't block your own movement. And you look out in the world and you look at the people that are touching your life, that are surrounding you in your own hemisphere, your surroundings, right? That you can see a lot of people are not moving in any way. And it's important for us to get the message right because how else are we supposed to move that which does not want to move, right? And again, because it's scary, because it's hard, and because it's not yet understood, because it's only a perception. It's only an idea that somebody's presenting to us. And each one of us gets to make the choice as to what we allow into our lives, what we allow into our hearts, and what we allow into our minds. And each one of us is making that choice, right? If you got the message when I came in to see how messed up, you know, allowing others to make those choices for me has been, uh, how many issues arrived from allowing that to happen, and some of the ideas that I had to shed because I took them on as truths, right? I didn't do the perspective thing. I didn't do the perspective thing. I just went straight to taking it as fact without trusting my own judgment. And even if I did trust my own judgment, even if I didn't feel comfortable, even if I even felt that there was something not right about it, it was somebody else's perspective and I took it as truth. It's a perception. While you're learning, it's a perception. A perspective is a belief. And for me, if you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know everything goes through the scanner. Everything. It has to. Because again, this is my brand and my message is my brand. Okay, you guys, I'm staring at a black screen here. I got through my live show tonight. It might not be perfect. I'll decide when I come back in whether or not to leave it up. Uh, well, I will leave it up for tonight. That anybody that regularly hangs out with me won't be disappointed. That won't feel that I failed and I gave up in that attempt to show up tonight. You guys, you have a great night. I so much appreciate that you come into my black screen. Let's see if anybody popped in. Oh, Eugene popped in. Hi, Eugene. I'm here. If you can hear me, I am here. I have given permissions to my camera or my phone to take over my laptop, but I will disconnect that permission just so that my webcam can take over again. You guys have a great night. Oh, I will see you now. Oh no, tomorrow's Friday. I'll be back tomorrow. Let's see you tomorrow. I bet you I can. You guys have a great night. See you tomorrow.